Some of your guys' teams need a crazy revamp, which is why I made you guys a Game Week 5 wildcard draft. Let's get straight into it. Okay, so let's start with the defense and the keeper situation. I've gone with David Raya in goal. Why at the start of the season did we downplay Arsenal? Is a question that I keep asking myself, because we know they're the best defense in the league. They've shown it over the last couple of seasons, and still a lot of us didn't have Arsenal defenders. It makes zero sense. But we're here to rectify mistakes. So I've gone with David Raya. I've gone with Mukiele as the 4 million defender. I think Sunderland have probably been the best newly promoted side out of the three, even though I've been impressed with all of them. Mukiele, so far, DEFCON monster. Every single game he's played, he's hit the DEFCON threshold. One thing I would say on the 4 million defender is, if a lot of people haven't played their bench boost, you probably want to match the week that you're planning to play the bench boost. In this case, I think game week 8 is a good opportunity to play a bench boost because the Dubravka has a good fixture, and Mukiele in game week 8 also has a good fixture in Wolves. So that's something that I think you could think about if you want to go with a Mukiele over a Rondon, for example, or Goodmanson from Leeds. Just think about when you're going to play your bench boost. I've gone with Gabriel, the Arsenal defender. Listen, we know Gabriel's ability in the box to attack corners. Funnily enough, game week 7, they have West Ham. And if anyone watched the West Ham-Tottenham game, West Ham were a shambles from corners. Like, literally, there's a chance that Gabriel could walk out of that game with 2 or 3 goals. I'm not even joking. The way Tottenham were bullying West Ham on corners, imagine what Gabriel's going to do. Like, I'm not going to captain him, but I'm not going to say he's not a bad captaincy option for that week, even though it sounds crazy. But listen, I've gone with Gabriel. I've also gone with Chris Richards. I think Chris Richards has shown to be a DEFCON monster, let's say. Also, Crystal Palace, I feel like, I'm not going to say the defense is fixture proof, but they have probably one of the better defenses from the, let's say, the mid-table teams. And Chris Richards is 4.5. It's not a bad route to that Crystal Palace defense. Of course, Lacroix is better, but it's difficult to afford him. Munoz is obviously better for the attacking returns potential. But I think Chris Richards, for that 4.5 million price tag, is not bad. Of course, you might want to go with a Van de Ven, for example, who's 4.6. But obviously, it depends on pricing and how your overall team structure is on a wild card, for example. I've also gone with Senesi. Senesi's another one. DEFCON monster. Bournemouth, as I said, Iriola has shown that, of course, they've lost a lot of players, defensive players, the keeper went, but defensively they're still resolute. Senesi, of course, has that goal for a couple of years ago when he was the starting centre-back for Bournemouth before his injury. He got like 4 goals and 5 assists or something. So nearly 10 attacking contributions for centre-back. It is crazy. And Bournemouth's next couple of fixtures, Newcastle in game week 5 is not the best. Game week 6 they have Leeds. That's a very good fixture. Game week 7 Fulham. Game week 8 Crystal Palace away. That's not a bad run of fixtures. And of course, with Senesi DEFCON potential, is a very nice pick. Also, I've gone to Tarkowski. Tarkowski, you can kind of see the theme of my defense. Another DEFCON monster. Listen, we know Tarkowski will probably hit DEFCON against Liverpool. The problem is Liverpool will probably score, which is why I've got him on the bench for now. But listen, this is probably a position where I think if people can't afford this team, they could downgrade to maybe a 5 million defender or a 4.5, maybe like a Van de Ven, for example. But as I said, I feel like this week, game week 4, really showed how much DEFCON lifts the floor of your team. For example, Anderson got DEFCON points from Fulham. The Nottingham Forest and Elliot Anderson also got DEFCON points. And Ndiaye got DEFCON points. Those players, a couple of them would have got 2 points, but they ended up getting 4 or 5 points just because of DEFCON. So I feel like DEFCON really ups the floor of your team. And I feel like Everton defense, the data hasn't been the best, but we know David Moyes is normally a resolute manager. Defensively, they're well organised. So that's why I've gone to Tarkowski. That is my defence. Let's get on to the midfield. Okay, so let's get on to the midfield. And I think people will realize straight away, this is why I don't think a Game Week 5 wildcard is optimal, even though some people might play it depending on the state of the teams. And that is just because there's not enough good fixtures for you to target on a Game Week 5 wildcard. For example, you want to double up on that, let's say, Arsenal defence. You want to have a couple City players, but they're obviously playing one another. Another problem is, Everton is a team that I think a lot of people would like in a wildcard because they've been impressive so far at the start of the season. But at the same time, they have Liverpool this week, 12:30 away from home. So it's not the most ideal week to play a wildcard. I think game week 6 now is the best wildcard opportunity. But listen, if people have to play it, I've made this team. Palmer's the first one I've gone with. Listen, Palmer off the bench against Brentford looked very, very good. Like, of course, now he's had a rest, of course, because of his injury. But I think his overall performance for the first time in a bit, especially in the Premier League, looked very, very sharp. He probably should have scored another goal straight into Kelleher's arms. But he really, really made a difference when he came on. And that was the sharpest I think Cole Palmer's looked in the Premier League for quite a while. And obviously, the fixtures coming up for Chelsea are not horrible. And of course, this week, Manchester United away, Cole Palmer, 5:30 kickoff is not a bad captaincy option. And in my team, you will see who I've gone with captain for this week. I've also gone with Semenyo. Semenyo on a wildcard is a must. And I think this week was massive for Semenyo owners and for anyone that's thinking about getting Semenyo, because obviously Clive went on the pitch, but anyone who would have had Semenyo probably would have, or anyone that watches Bournemouth probably would have expected Ivan Nilsson to take a penalty when Bournemouth got it. But it was Semenyo. So now Semenyo, of course, he started the season brilliantly, but he's added another route of points with penalties. So that is something that if you're a Semenyo owner, if you're thinking about getting Semenyo, it changes it completely. Like, he's definitely like a must own on a wild card. And also, I want to say this. I feel like Semenyo plays better when Tavernier is in the team, just because I feel like Tavernier is more of like a pass-first midfielder, if that makes sense. I wonder how, if Justin Kluivert gets back into the team, who's a bit more, let's say, shot-orientated, how that affects Semenyo's, let's say, goal tally or potential to get FPL points. I don't think it'll change too much, because we know Semenyo is obviously a brilliant asset and a brilliant player, probably the best left winger in the league right now. But that is just something to think about. I've also gone with eliminating Diaz. And this way, I think a lot of people are going to debate eliminating Diaz versus Jack Grealish. I think now, at this point, game week 5, you have to go with Diaz. And the only reason is, Jack Grealish in game week 8 has Man City's parent club. He can't play in that. Also, I think with Ndiaye, he has penalties. That's positive. He got DEFCON on the weekend, which is well. And he's shown to be quite well ranked for DEFCON. And obviously, when you're watching Ndiaye play, right now he's looking very, very threatening. David Moyes spoke about it after the game. Ndiaye, Jack Grealish on the other side were a massive threat for Aston Villa. How Everton didn't score, by the way, was crazy. But Ndiaye, when you're watching it, passes the eye test, the data is good. DEFCON monster on penalties, playing for a very good attacking side right now in Everton. What's not to like? I've also gone to Reinders and Drewsbury Hall on the bench. Again, Reinders is more for game week 6. Burnley. The fixtures are going to turn for Manchester City. You want to probably a double up with Reinders and obviously Erling Haaland, who will be in his wildcard. Hate to break it to you. There's no point in hiding that. But yeah, I've gone to Reinders. I've also gone to Drewsbury Hall. The Drewsbury Hall pick is very interesting because, again, I feel like that 5 million midfielder that you pick depends on your team strategy when you want to bench boost, for example. Because I don't mind Sarr from Tottenham either, but the reason I say Sarr, he rates very well for DEFCON. Also, we expected probably, or some people expected Xavi Simons when he came into Tottenham to play centrally, but that weren't the case. Pape Sarr, or Pape Sarr, is that his full name? I feel like it is. Was still playing centrally. Xavi Simons was playing on the left-hand side. Of course, there's times where Simons could play inside in that 10, maybe Sarr misses out. But so far this season, his minutes look good. He looks well for DEFCON. And obviously, we know Sarr has that goal for it, which a lot of people probably don't necessarily think about when you watch Sarr, or the data proves kind of thing. But Sarr, obviously, he gets himself into goal-scoring opportunities, which is obviously nice. So that is my midfield. Let's look at my attack. And listen, no surprises with the attack. Haaland has to be in. I said it on my transfer plan video. This is probably the fittest Haaland's looked since his first season in the Premier League. He's looking a lot sharper in front of goal. His movement a lot better. Listen, now is the time to make that switch from Salah to Haaland. I think accommodating both Salah and Haaland, by the way, on a wildcard, you can do. You can obviously upgrade Palmer to a Salah, but then you're downgrading Gyökeres to a 4.5. Do you really want to do that? I'm not too sure. But for this draft, I've gone with Haaland. Listen, game week 6 is probably the next, as I said, optimal wildcard window. Everyone's going to have Haaland. I think game week 6 is also a brilliant, by the way, opportunity to triple captain Haaland against Burnley. But obviously, it depends on people's strategies. I've also gone to Gyökeres. I feel like Gyökeres has kind of been underrated by people in terms of he's playing for one of the best teams in the league, in Arsenal. We know Gyökeres has that transitional threat every single time he's on the football pitch. He scored a couple goals, 3 goals so far in the Premier League in the opening 4 games, which is not bad. But at the same time, like, people still want to talk about Gyökeres as like a bad player. Of course, a bad player doesn't equal a bad FPL player, but I feel like we need to give Gyökeres a bit of time. And also, Arsenal do have good fixtures, and he's on penalties. And Arsenal still have the likes of Bukayo Saka's coming back. Martin Odegaard hasn't really been hitting the heights, and of course, he came off injured again on the weekend. So there are a couple of variables that could help Gyökeres as an FPL asset going forward. For example, can you imagine Saka ball in Gyökeres header, or Gyökeres back post getting onto a Saka cross? You can. Of course, Eze on the other side is looking a threat. Madueke's looking very good, but Bukayo Saka in it. He's another level kind of thing. And another level will help Gyökeres hopefully return more FPL points. And I think Gyökeres, especially game week 7 against West Ham, will be a very, very popular FPL pick. I've also gone to João Pedro. I'm not too sure on João Pedro. I said this on my team selection video the other day. João Pedro going into the season, we expected to be a 78-minute man. And then all of a sudden, with a couple of injuries, we expected João Pedro to all of a sudden become a 90-minute man. That's not going to be the case. And we came off early in the weekend, on the weekend as well. Of course, he came back late, or Brazil had a game quite late on. He played a couple of games on the international break. That didn't help. Also, Chelsea's rotation with the Champions League starting now. For example, they got Bayern Munich on this week, Wednesday, I believe. How many minutes is João Pedro going to get, and how is that going to affect his minutes going forward? Of course, do I expect João Pedro to still start in the Premier League? Yes. But at the same time, I do expect some sort of rotation. We saw it. Tyreek George could play up top, for example. Pedro now obviously shown last season he has the ability to play up top. They still have Mark Guehi. Of course, Mark Guehi went even to the squad, so I don't think that's going to be plenty of minutes taken away from João Pedro, but that is an option. So that's why I'm kind of wary of João Pedro, but at the same time, his ownership's at 66%. Betting against João Pedro right now in the FPL, for me, is a recipe for disaster kind of thing. And we know he has that aerial threat as well. We saw it for that Palmer goal. Wins his header, or not even wins his header. The ball comes off his shoulder kind of thing, or head, and it falls to Palmer, gets the assist for that. But listen, and also gets 2 bonus. So he rates quite well with the bonus point system, which is crazy. How for that assist, by the way, he went from 0 to 2 bonus just for that. It's crazy. But what can you do? João Pedro's ownership is quite nice, or you don't want to risk it kind of thing. That's why I've gone with this team. Of course, as I said, game week 5 is not an optimal week to wildcard. But obviously, some people have hit it. For example, Tom Hadley on Twitter, everyone will know him, former #1 in the FPL, has hit it. I don't think it's the optimal strategy, but at the same time, I can understand why, because some teams need surgery. Mine potentially. But this is my game week 5 wildcard draft. Especially for game week 6 onwards, it looks phenomenal. And that is something I am going to think about. But before we end the video, make sure you guys like the video. Comment your thoughts on this wildcard team. Subscribe to the channel. And let me know if there's any other plays that you're thinking about for wildcard. Let me know, guys. And I'll be back soon.